I'm Dr. Scott Lynn, Research and Education Director for Swing Catalyst, here with one of the longest serving Swing Catalyst users. When did you buy your first plate?
What was it? It was, I think Tom and I talked about this a couple weeks ago. I think it was, golly, 2009 possibly?
2009. So it's been
14 years. 14. Nah, I think I bought it. It was either 9 or 10 here at the PGA Show. It was their first PGA Show, and I was the first one that bought.
So good. So Tony Ruggiero,
I love spending money.
PGA Tour coach, worked with a bunch of really good players, really good at developing young players. So your dew sweeper camps, you have young players that come in, they work with you growing up, they get scholarships, they go to college, they go on and become pros. And you've been using this for a long time now. And I think one of the cool things about the dew sweepers is the team aspect of coaching. So talk a little bit about how you've integrated the Swing Catalyst in your kind of whole team approach to making kids better.
Well, I started with the Swing Catalyst because I had great mentors. One of them's right here out there in the crowd, Wayne Flint, who uses Swing Catalyst as well. But, when I started teaching, they told, I was broke, right? I mean, in fact, one time Wayne and I chased a $20 bill across a Waffle House parking lot in the rain. No shit. And we got it too, didn't we? And chasing at them. But anyways, I was broke. I mean, I was living in a place with no power and learning to teach. And Hank Johnson, who and I mentored under, and Wayne, and they showed me, like, basically it was like, hey, if you can get people grip the club, posture yourself to it, ball in the right spot, and you can teach them to pivot, make a pivot back and through, make a divot. They're like, I'll never forget, Wayne said, you'll make $50,000 a year. And I was like, $50,000? Hell yes, I'm in, right?
Oh, man.
I was like, I'm sold. So anyways, you fast forward, I started doing that. And a lot of people around, Wayne could tell you stories over beers, like, man, they'd all be, all he's teaching is pivot. It's all he teaches, all right? But all of a sudden I started having people get better. One of the videos I know you found in there, Bobby Wyatt, started teaching a guy. He became, #1 junior in the world and then the #1 amateur. And guys were getting better. And I would go bounce stuff off of Wayne and Hank. And I really still just stuck to teaching pivot. But I kind of didn't know why they were getting better. And you would listen to other people talking about things. I was like, I was trying to figure out why it worked. And then, so that's why I bought my first Swing Catalyst. Because I was like, I'm teaching pivot. People are getting better. Maybe this will help me figure out why people are getting better. Then you fast forward that a little longer. Wasn't too many PGA shows after that. That was a while, but like you and I did the one, and same type of deal we're doing here. And I really just wanted you to explain to me, like, why when I talk in Alabama with my Alabama language, why do people get better, right? And that's kind of how we got today. And all along, I've always thought, like, I'm not the smartest guy, and I've always felt like if we could surround kids or people that want to get better with people that I think are great from all walks of or different spokes and parts of the game, whether it's Wayne and all his expertise, or you bringing you in for biomechanics, Colby Touye or Morgan Hale in for fitness, whatever. I felt like Mark Hackett, Dan Terleski, the folks at Old Palm, I just felt like we had a chance to make them better by surrounding them. But, I mean, this is the biggest – it's the one thing that I use everywhere I go.
And I really like that because a lot of people look at these graphs and they look at this stuff and they get intimidated. They're like, oh, I don't know about that. I don't know.
I got to watch my language here. This get X-rated. But, like, I don't know shit about any of that, right? I mean, I know how to make people better. I bring him in to explain it, right?
Yeah, and I remember, I think it was that first PGA show, you brought in some videos or some Swing Catalyst data of a couple of your good players. And I remember at the time, you had Smiley Kaufman.
Right.
You had
Lucas Glover. Me for the first time.
You had Lucas Glover. You had all these guys. And I remember, Lucas was clearly a draw bias player.
Oh, yeah.
He hated to see the ball curve to the right. And so he was a really draw bias player. And I remember you talking about his pivot and some of the stuff you worked on. And one of the things you worked on was getting him kind of deeper into this hip so that he's back into his heel. And one thing we found with the Swing Catalyst that I think is really important, and this is something that really good coaches kind of figure out on their own, right? You kind of figure this out, that this helps them draw the ball. Mm-hmm. You didn't really know why. If you turn it live for a sec there, so if you can see here, what we found is as you get kind of down to your downswing, this little line that shows up on swing catalyst there is highly correlated with swing direction.
Yep.
And so if we can get a deeper pivot into this right heel, you can see how now that line is pointing out to the right and creating more of a tendency to get that club moving in this direction. If you have a person that doesn't pivot properly and they end up kind of in this right toe, you can see how now that's pointed over there. And that's a death move for a drawer of the golf ball.
Right. And I think one of the first times that Lucas came to work with me, I think it was at the Country Club of Mobile, first time I had him and put him on a swing cat. And, when he would hit one that wasn't very good, it's like this trace is way different because he's a fader of the ball, right? Yep. But like Lucas's pressure was more out towards his toes, and then it would swipe more left quick, right? And he had a hard time starting it right and drawing.
Yeah.
And so, it was a big part of, I think more than anything, like it hasn't necessarily changed anything I teach. It helps me explain it more. I think it helps you understand it deeper.
Yeah.
But I don't know that it's changed what I think I'm fortunate and I had such a great foundation that a lot of the stuff that I teach is held up through the test, held the test of time. But it helps me explain it. And you got guys like Andy Ogletree up there. He went to Georgia Tech. He's a Ned, right? Like, so you got to be able to explain all that stuff to them because they want to know.
Right. And I think this is becoming much more widely used. A lot of players are now understanding this stuff. Rick Sessinghouse called me a couple of weeks ago and said that Colin wanted to get on this. He's heard some people talking about it. He wants to get on it. He wants to figure out what's going on. So if you're working with players these days that are using technology and understanding it, having the ability to show them what's going on and having it not just be your opinion. And I remember working with Lucas with you and being like, Lucas, watch when it does this, see what the ball did. And he's like, oh, okay, that makes tons of sense versus you just saying, Lucas, I kind of think it's this.
Right. No, exactly. And we've done lots of cool things on it. I think one of the best sessions we've had with it was, we'll keep going back to him, but, he was having a hard time drawing it, right? And we'd been working on getting the club to be less into out. Mm-hmm. And he'd gotten the pressure to not be to the heel and to the toe enough. So we had him hit big hooks and then big cuts on the plate and then try to find the middle, right? Now, that was one of those lessons where you helped me and I was like, shit, I'm going to keep doing that, right? Yeah. I do that a lot. You learn to do that. The Goldilocks. Done again, has come up with that. But that's fantastic.
And that's something, I love how simple you keep it because oftentimes, we can get very complex in a golf lesson and that can make our players worse if they're thinking about too many things.
So if we take somebody through this, like I would take somebody through it, then you can explain. Like, so I talk about the dot. Yeah. Right? I don't even know what the hell it's called, but I call it a dot, right?
Yeah.
And I just, in my little world, that's like, okay, so I'm trying to get people to move that dot by moving this, right? By moving their center. And so I think one of the things that when young teachers, because we do that golf development page with a bunch of, young up and coming teachers, a lot of them we've seen walking around here, is like they're, some of them are nervous about this stuff because they don't understand everything. And I think that one of the things that you have to understand is you can use as much or as little of that as you want.
Exactly.
And you don't have to show everything on there to your student.
No. And if you'll notice here, can you put it in live mode again? So and I've actually seen a lot of golf teachers do that. If you hit this little triangle right here, can you hit the triangle to make the data go away? I hit the little triangle right here. If you hit that, you don't have a clue anything's being collected in the background. It just looks like a video system. And so they'll be hitting balls and you can run it this way with the student in front of you. Then when they leave, you could dig back into the ground stuff and say, oh, I wonder why that worked.
Yeah.
And what happened with that. Another really cool thing. So your basic tenets are posture.
I think one of the things that's most underrated about this, nobody pays attention to, is the ability to get a player balanced.
Balanced and posture,
balanced
right?
at address and to stay balanced during the swing.
Right. And so we'll often have players, if you put it live now, put the pressure back up there. You'll often have players that'll set up and they're getting ready to hit and they'll look like this. Now you can see here, you can see my heels, but you can't see my toes. And they're unbalanced to start with. And if I'm unbalanced to start with, biomechanics is kind of a game of opposites. So if I'm on my heels to start with, I can't go more into my heels. I'm going to fall over. So what happens when you swing?
Go to
you
the
kind of
toes.
dive then towards your toes, and then we start getting the heel shots. Might get the odd shank, and so talk about the one drill we kind of do quite often for posture
I think
or for balance. I would
the
say
two things I think we use the most with posture and balance are one to go on. I'll use a club here. Go on.
Don't fall over there.
Where you go. I know it's tricky, right? So where you lean on your heels, go all the way on your toes, and you just kind of rock back and forth, right? And the other thing I think that we use a ton is we use those balance discs, right? And putting somebody on I should have brought them, but two balance discs right here, and let them learn to find balance, and then step right off onto the plate with it live where they can see it, I think is really cool. And it's amazing how quick that'll fix people's posture without us having to gyrate them around and move them.
Yeah, and I think the less you can say to your student, the better, right? If you can fix 12 things with one thing, and it's amazing once you get your players balanced at setup, a whole bunch of other stuff gets better without you even talking about it. And I really like the idea of exploring the edges, right? If I'm in my heels and I kind of feel like I'm balanced here, I don't know what my toes feel like, go explore your toes, and then go back and explore your heels, and then find that 50% between there. Mm-hmm. That can be a really good drill to allow people to feel like what it feels like to stay balanced. All right, perfect. Do you want to go through Andy a little bit here?
Yeah, we can go through Andy.
Sure. Fine. Load up. Perfect. What's the difference between the 3 and the 1-star? Was the
no
one
clue.
originally?
One was probably the first swing.
Okay.
So look, he's a fader, but he tends to get, and I don't remember these videos. I know this was in my studio, but he tends to get too much on his toes, and when he gets too much on his toes, he doesn't turn back into his right hip enough, and the pressure stays out there, and then he doesn't hit it any good.
So for any of you who don't know, Andy Ogletree won the U.S. Amateur at Pinehurst in 2019.
Right.
He was then low amateur at the Masters in 20.
That was the COVID Masters.
The COVID Masters in November. Really good player. He's gone and played a little bit on the Live Tour.
Played one on the Live.
Asia.
He left me for about 6-7 months, and then came back, and he's played nice since then. I mean, he won over in, I'm going to mess this up, I think he won in Egypt on the Asian Tour, and he beat, it's a good field. I mean, there was a bunch of guys, you would know, Ryder Cuppers and stuff on it. So he's back playing good. We just did a bunch of work on the swing catalyst at Old Palm a couple weeks ago. So, yeah, again, I mean, I think the secret to success as a teacher is to help your student find the one or two things that they do, measure it, and then to me, the recipe for success is the ability to keep them on that for a long period of time,
right,
and not jump around. And I think if you can do that, I think you got a chance to make people better.
Yeah, and I think a really good way to use a system like this is when they're playing really well, just bring them in, measure it, don't say anything.
We've done that a handful of times.
Right. And then when stuff gets off, as it usually does, it can be they're just getting way too far into their trail side. They're not getting enough into their trail side. That line that we talked about, the center of pressure line, is pointed to the right or to the left, and they can't hit the shot that they want to hit. So having that, and then again, becomes not your opinion anymore, right? It's fact up there. Hey, this is you back in 2019 before you won the USAM. Look what you're doing. Here's you today.
Yeah.
It's much different. How do we get back to that?
I've told you this 1,000 times. I think that the one thing I wish that I'd had, so when I first moved over to the Country Club at Mobile, we didn't have a building. So my original swing catalyst was in storage, right? And at the time, I was working with Smiley when he had that run for 18 months where he played some great golf.
Almost won the Masters.
Right. He was in the last group at Augusta. And, we didn't have any of that on him. And you guys hadn't started going to tour events. The next year was the first year where you started going to tour events, 2 or 3 of them, and collecting data.
Yeah.
I wish I would have had more of that data from when he played good.
Right.
So since that, I think we learn a lot from things we screw up, right? Like you learn from things that you didn't do very well. And so I was like, I don't want that to happen again.
Right.
So, when Ben played really good at the USAM and finished second runner-up, I mean, one of the first things I did was get him back on it to get as much data, right? Because I don't want that to happen again. And so I think it's really valuable because it would have helped me with Smiley. Like when he got to spiraling and, things weren't good, he was going, well, it doesn't feel like it used to. But, right, but his feel had changed. His life had changed.
Feels change all the time.
So, and I didn't have anything other than just video 2D. And I could make stuff look the same, but it didn't feel the same to him, and there was no other way to prove it.
Right. No, that's really good. And I think having it not be your opinion anymore, because if you showed him a video like it kind of looks like this, but it doesn't feel the same. Well, if you're like, dude, you're loading the ground much different, or you're loading the ground the same. And that was the same thing. We just worked with Colin Morikawa a couple of weeks ago, and I asked his coach, do we have data from right before he won at Harding Park? And they're like, no. I was like, wouldn't that be super helpful, right? If we knew what he was doing when he was hitting those little butter cuts into the 300-yard par 4 there, that would have been super helpful. Anybody have any questions for Tony? The type of work he does.
Can't let me get out of here this easy. But keep your right arm. I mean, how to keep your. That's what I'm working with Kyle on. Keeping his right arm in front of his seam of his shirt to make his rib cage turn more. Because he does the same thing. He gets when Kyle isn't swinging very well, he goes like that, right? And
that would show the pressure out to the toes.
Goes out to his toe, and then he gets real to the heel quick, right?
And he hits some wipey cuts, right?
Wipey, and he hangs back, right? So same thing. And I think another good point for Swing Catalyst is no matter what your preferences are as a teacher, everybody's got them. I don't care what they're saying. Everybody's got a preference. Or what you teach, you can teach on this, right? It doesn't tell you what's good or what's bad or what your preference is. You can use any we've been doing this long enough. I'm pretty centered. I hate front post, right?
You hate my rear post.
I hate that shit, right? So, and I mean, it's okay. We fight about it and then go drink. Like he'll go to a student and he'll be like, I'll see him doing this. He's got the guy going like that, and I just walk by and no, right? So we do. But it's okay to disagree, 100%. Right? And then there's been times that, like, the guy struggled and you've jumped in, excuse me, and done some of that, and it helped, right? Like, and we find a middle ground. And I think that's another good part for people to learn coaching is the more you surround people, excuse me, even with different ideas and different views, it can help you come to a solution. And it's okay for people to disagree.
Yep.
I think in the world today, not many people understand that, but it's okay to disagree.
No, and it's been often at Dew Sweeper camps. That's what I love about it. Anybody just jumps up and gives them stuff. And I'll jump up and give him stuff, and I'll be like, oh, yeah, don't do that anymore. Tony, can you help? Can you help with this? And he jumps in, or Wayne jumps in, or Jackson jumps in.
Well, we had one guy whose grip was so terrible, and he twisted his face around. And I'm sitting at the back, and you got up to do something, and then Colby got up to do something, and then both of y'all just sat down and go, he needs you. No force plate in the world was going to fix his damn grip, right? I mean, so, so it's a combination. It's, Wayne's a big part of it. He's been to so many of them. And, I think, too, when you have players that play well, like we've been fortunate to have some play well from time to time, everybody gets a little fun out of it, right? Sure. Because we're all in the mix together. We're all trying to help. I think the more we can coach a player without a bunch of ego for ourselves and work together to make a player better, I think the better chance we got of doing it.
Perfect. So put yourself together with a team. You don't have to know everything. Tony made the decision a long time ago. Hey, I got this technology. I'm going to use it in a certain way. I don't think he ever looks at the graphs. That's totally cool. He brings me in.
There's graphs on there? I didn't even know there's graphs on there.
We dial in the graphs, which is all good. So put yourself together with a team. Don't be afraid of the technology. You can use it to the best of your ability. We got a lot of people with different levels of knowledge that can really use this technology to make people better.
More than you think about it.
I know. You're sneaky. That's for sure. Tony, thank you, man.
You're the best. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
If anybody has any questions, we'll be hanging out.